Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. It's Shirley with Spirit of Matter. And I realized I made a little bit of a mistake when it came to the last video for the Pluto generation, but regarding the Neptune. So, of course, I made a mistake regarding the Neptune. And I said the Pluto Librans are going through the Neptune sextile. No, the Pluto Scorpios are ending their Neptune sextile. You guys are going from the square to the trine. Now, of course, Neptune takes kind of like more than a decade, more than 2 decades in a given sign. And that might be the reason that while some of you are like, oh, we're just going through the trine now, the early Pluto Sag are like, oh, we're finalizing things, it's coming to the trine. The younger, the middle phase, the later phases are climbing up or are in the midst of the Neptune Square. So with Neptune, you will be going towards the trine as Neptune ingresses into Aries, while right now you're going through the squares, all the while the younger generations, the Pluto Scorpios, they're going through the Neptune sextile, culminating in the square. What is Neptune? Healing models. So other than like relational stuff where you may have been thinking about ideation and devaluation, I've been taught that, and then you realize that personality disorders are not a thing. CPTSD is a thing. Relational traumas are a thing. But the things that were serving at a certain time, that were a part of the reality at a certain time, are no longer. And in the midst of the Neptune square, there's a crisis. You understand this through a crisis. Okay? So I'm going to give, I'm going to delve right into it. Because it's not just your relationships, that it's going to be through your relationships and times. Some of you might be going through a phase, if you're the patient, where certain healing models are actually persecution, even religious persecution, because Pisces is religion as well. Even certain diagnosis that you get is completely religious persecution, if it's kind of like a mental thing. And some of you going through a phase where you've been taught that you'll have to take this and that neurotoxin basically all your life. And not only that, they tell your family, whether it's the younger people or the older people, to pay very close attention, that you keep taking this neurotoxin all your life. You know about beta blockers, there used to be SSRIs, and so on. And what your family doesn't understand is that basically they're being indoctrinated to persecute you and make sure you poison yourself until you die in a very horrible way. And only now you're getting to the point that, hey, that's not good for me. I did try to reduce, I did try to change the cocktail. They literally call this a cocktail when they have like the compound drugs, to whether it's mental health, and that shit's not been working. On the other hand, it can be the case that you are like on the grind in this completely natural healing thing, and you've been told you just eat organic food, everything's gonna be okay. And you're learning that your organic food is being watered with, I don't know, this is Pluto, okay? Watered with the water that you throw, like you throw from the toilet. Basically, the plumbing. I've seen this in Israel. I've seen this when I was in between houses, actually. So you learn even stuff like that. Okay, the water's been polluted, so your food, your organic food, is not, and the water is filled with neurotoxins. It's not just fluoride, and you understand that, no, that's not what needs to be. But you being surrounded by people who tell you gotta eat vegetables, gotta eat fruits, you gotta this, you gotta that, kind of like a Mark Bayersky, like you cannot eat meat, you cannot eat these. Yes, but you're also not living in kind of like in Bali or in a place where you don't where you do have something that resembles that organic food anymore. You're definitely not growing your own food in waters that are neurotoxins clear. Or some of you are, and then you find out that, hey, my bones are still getting weird, and those things are not helping. Or you're finding out that the meat that you are eating is kind of like, oh, you're eating paleo or you're eating keto. Keto is one thing, keto. And you kind of find out that, oh shit, that does spike up my cholesterol. Or you kind of find out that that's not the meat. Like you've been buying the best meat, quality meat that you can. It's like, yes, they're being grass-fed, but the grass is polluted with neurotoxins in the water, and so on and so forth. So both the holistic medicine ideal is the breaking of the dream when it comes to nourishing yourself, or healing models, or you find out that your Jung-based adopted New Age is, or Osho-based adopted New Age is kind of like, oh, let's take the explanation that a serial Osho, not Jung, that a serial rapist, I don't know, yeah, what Osho had about why does rape happen, and just use that to heal. And you're not understanding why does it not work? Why don't I actually heal? I thought I'm going to heal. Okay? So it's going to be okay. Then a Pluto Scorpio comes that you're like, the fuck are you reciting rapist lines to me? You're my freaking, you're supposed to be like my freaking inspiration on how to get out of this. And some of you are not going through this just as patients. So some of you are healers. Some of you are doctors. Some of you are prescribing these neurotoxins and indoctrinating the families of people to persecute them. And fundamentally so, because you read the research. Okay? And you're like, I know how to read research. No, you don't. If you've been reading a Nova, you're like, really? But also you're not to blame for that, because you were not exposed to the number of deaths that you just not see. And then for some of you, maybe it started to happen to you, to a family member, and you look it up, you find out, oh my God, this is total scam, I must expose that. And of course, you understand what happened to the people that exposed that. So now we're getting also into leaking, which is another function of Neptune, is to leak information. Information going missing and information popping up. And so for you, this might be just information about those healing models. It's like, oh, Osho was a serial rapist. Oh, Jung was not actually talking about countertransference. It was Sabina Spieler-Rhein, who was a patient that recovered very likely from incest and slept with Jung and internalized the dynamic, saying that she initiated this, but he responded to that. No, not necessarily. Okay, so you are in your kindest intentions are trying to take accountability with the models of the offender. So that is, and in Jung case, it's actually not the model of the offenders. It's the plagiarized model of the unhealed survivor, which is another issue because we should be listening to survivors. But here there is an actual issue where The unhealed survivor gives us a model that's ideating the situation and their power in the situation. Um, and that's another, difficulty, because we should be listening to our patients when our patients are, having like this escapist views, um, and we adapt them and we plagiarize them in Jung's case, then we don't even get the source of where was that only half true, where was that only half relevant, where was that actually internalizing the blame for her incest. And so a lot of us are saying Jung, Jung, Jung. I was saying Jung too when it was my sextile, and I was like, oh, there is this Jung guy that talks about the inner shadow, and I was trying to do that with people who were blatantly offenders, and I don't mean like because they were internally bad people, they were just doing things that are offenders. No, they were not necessarily entirely an inner shadow of mine, but rather an external person with their own complexes, and trying to understand my complexes in terms of their complexes would be a giant loophole that I spent like almost a decade navigating, only to find out that no, not everything is my reflection. They are a distinct person, and I should deal with them in that regard. It doesn't mean that there are not things that could reflect me of me. It's just kind of like they're a person. They're the human, they exist. Okay, so not everything that they do is kind of like something that I would do or that I have in me, and it would, and that sometimes was the source of the misunderstanding. You're trying to understand, I don't know, if you're not inherently sadistic, trying to understand a sadism of a person by projecting your own yourself onto them because you're trying to look for that within yourself, or you're trying to think that you are inherently sadistic, which you would make a satire of yourself because you're not. so, so that does spring a certain loophole that give you kind of like a protection of, oh, I'm taking accountability, I'm taking responsibility outward. You don't know, you're just raping your soul. And that's what's up. And then when you get the breaking off this model, like, oh shit, responsibilities, guys, equal rapes. That's what I was talking about previously. But of course, it's not equaling, but you navigate your way out of this, but not in the models that you knew that were not relevant. So this could be information popping up, so missing information popping up, but there's also the chance that information is just missing, and it looks like a great idea. Okay, so you want to think about, kind of like chips in your brain. Okay, so if you don't know, if you think that it's a conspiracy theory that people went in and out of hospitals, you weren't doing my job of kind of like being in those groups of people who had PTSD, growing into accepting PTSD and CPTSD, talking about all these things until they got to the DSM, only to find out that the DSM is not really completely, let's say, Geert Wilders should do to the Bible, to the DSM what it did to the Quran. Should have a DSM cartoon contest, or maybe I shall declare that. And he would be as in life risk, so to speak. And so for some of you are finding that the information that you need to make a decision is missing, but you don't know that now. So that might be the square. You get a square with Neptune, it might be missing information as much as it might be information popping up. So if you don't know what's on, okay, let's say when they let's say you might try this chip in the brain. So like millions of people died before you, millions of people went in and out of hospitals before you until they got a chip out of the brain. But you'll be thinking, I'm the first person that just died. I'm this experimental thing. I'm going to try that. I'm going to see. I'm going to try to make it work. and only to find out. Okay. Another Neptune thing can be all these kind of like manifestation techniques or even magic. And you might be at the point of square relations where some information was missing. Are you doing that in a way that was cultivating certain long-term, Neptune's long-term effect of something, or you're being kind of like disillusioned from what it does or from how it does that. You thought I can work with this, but it's actually bringing in results that are dramatically let down, and it is through a crisis that you have to let go of what's not serving, or you had an addiction to a certain type of food or a healing model, or relation. Yes, if it's on a relational level. It can also be around beliefs, yes, the power of belief and so on. Again, the Pluto Scorpios are building up to the square. You are mostly releasing from the square. Okay, except for the very late Pluto Librans, you're mostly releasing from the square and going towards your trine. The very early are going towards your trine. So you're like, you already get that. You're like, yeah, surely I know that. I've been trying to push that. I've been shadow banned. I'm the YouTube videos that you've been watching about these things, and learning about these things. Okay, I'm the person who pushed that through. I've done that. Like I'm in the trying. I'm in the trying. Like you finally getting that is going to your Neptune Square. I am in the trine. It's true. If you are of the Neptune Sag, the early degrees, of course, you're approaching your trine. Okay, so you're like, I told you so. Finally, people see it. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Oh, you see that the people that you thought were the most crazy at the mental hospital, you see that they were the most correct about what's going on right now? I'm like, yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Absolutely. These guys were the most predictive. So those are the earlier, but the middle phase are still relaxing from this. Okay, you're still finding out that the new way for dealing with, you still have to refine it. And the late Pluto Librans, you're in the midst of the square. Okay, you are the square. So the late Pluto Librans, and even into the middle phase, you still are in the thrones of the Neptune Square. It just takes that long, and again, some of you are going through this as doctors. It's not because you're not intelligent, which is the most painful thing about this, because it's not that you're stupid. You're highly intelligent. Your power is in scientific thought, but the information was missing. You can be the best scientist in the world if you don't listen to the patient. Okay? Before enlightenment, listen to the patient. After enlightenment, listen to the patient. And if you plagiarize what the patient says, then they won't be able to differentiate between how the patient was seeing things when they were not yet recovered and your doctrine of healing, Carl Jung. So, so you'll be hated for no reason even. And so Neptune, when he talks about healing, is basically the drugs, what a drug can do, what a drug can't do, but also the process of learning. Okay, if you talk about, let's say, I know I have been indoctrinated in that way. Many people have been indoctrinated in that way. It's like, oh, experiments in human beings that were done like during the Second World War, they were horrifying. But we got so much science out of them. That was the indoctrination. That was atrocity. But then we did get insights, and there's like an ethical question of how to do experiments and so on. So, especially if you're doing like gynecology, but literally every model that Dr. Mengele and his 20, 30 co-workers have discovered is basically falling down like a tower of cards. And you find out that not even that is true. We could be finding that out through a crisis. Okay? I'm tending to my teeth right now. Saturn is co-present in Pisces with Neptune, and that's been ongoing since Saturn was in Aquarius. I'll find out things like, where's the food, what the food that I eat, even defluoridization of the water, like building an A-bomb, because that's what they use fluoride for. The connection between the heart and heart attacks, which is the most prevalent cause of dying, like other than cancer or so. And just building up of plaque in the teeth, but also the removing of plaque. If you cut through, it can enter the bloodstream, and then you can get a heart attack just as well. The possible notion that dying from a heart attack, horrible as it is not anywhere near as horrible as the deaths that are happening right now in the world. We're just beginning to hear about them, and many, many things that are standing in the way between me and removing the plaque in my teeth to to having healthy teeth, as well as kind of like the ancestral lineages and so on and so forth. Really weird stuff. And I'm like, dude, it's just like what we used to think of a decade ago when I was, I don't know, 2014. Like, oh, that's the usual checkup you make on your teeth. You might don't want to do it too often because you don't want to destroy your enamel. So that's what's up. Okay? None of that is relevant. None of the way that we've been told to care for our teeth is relevant anymore. And what we've told from like holistic medicine is kind of like, yeah, but if your coconut is going in fluoridized water and watered by, kind of like what the water that goes through the plumbing, you're not getting the coconut that the Vedic used to heal their teeth. It's kind of like a worst case. I hope that's not the case. I don't take my coconut oil. But olive oil is no longer in Western society. It's got Israel too. So those might be like things going missing. You're like, oh, I should do the diets like the Vedic, but you don't have the food of the Vedics. Or, oh, I should really try this new technology. It's not new. It's since chaos theory. They've been working on that and making experiments in people, and they've been dying, and it's been covered up since the 70s. So you're not making it like a frontier experiment in olanzapine. No, it's not. Okay. In Israel, we say that suckers don't die, they change. In this case, they die and they change. They change them. But it's not about being a sucker. It's just like you're a human being. You're thinking in terms of like the science, and if you're not being exposed to the many deaths related. And with Neptune, there's always a sense of either being lost, hopeless, and ideating. So you kind of like, you've been thirsty for healing. That's why, okay? If I can think about, myself and writing Sugar-Free Lemonade, which was about the structure of the academia and the science and the this and that, and then going to a clinically trained psychologist because that's what was available. Managed to get funding to that type of therapy. They recommended that type of therapist. And I went there and I wasn't thinking much because I was in a crisis situation. And I said, I cannot litigate and I cannot understand if I need to litigate if I don't treat myself or attend to myself, to my state. I have to work with whoever is right now. And only to find out that I myself was exposing what's on, but it's kind of like, it's that fated stupid. That's the crisis. And so you are, the later Pluto Libras are going through the full-blown square right now, I'm just approaching that, so I'll be watching you to see how it works. And some of you are medical profession. Another thing is spine. One of the things that people think about spine or spies, I actually seen, okay, in Israel, this was one of the last episodes of Flying Bombardier, one of the last sketches. And Flying Bombardier was written under fire since October 7. We thought that our village is going to be included as well in the slaughtering and stuff. And of course, we experienced on our body astrally a lot of the things that were done. So the thing is that I saw an article about a psychologist that tries to evaluate why do spies betray, intelligence people, spies betray their nations, okay? So they were trying to have like an explanation of the forces that would make a person betray. And what they've neglected is the fact that the person who recruits this spy is recruited. I wrote Sugar Free Lemonade on that with officers in the army. So it's lower rank, it's not spies, but I did not know that was too relevant for that as well. And it taken people, and I'm very grateful to a person who testified that they were working actually for the CIA. They were, I think, of Caucasian origin. And they were growing, Caucasian are really high achieving, but they were not ever growing into a place where they were growing with love. They were growing with achievements. And so they didn't think they need love. And so they became this psychopathic person who would do everything to achieve a V. Okay, that was what they were recruiting. So the fact that he had sociopathic tendencies, instead of tending to that and treating that, and making growing with love accessible to him, I just think about, they don't know what energy. It was the psychologist that I went to after Sugar Free Lemonade, and I'm like, oh my god, it could absolutely be his story. Although he showed a lot of empathy, so it's kind of like, it's weird. While being incredibly whatever. But the thing is that they were recruiting you because they're recruiting spies because they have this sociopathic, psychopathic tendency. But even those words are outdated. It's just that like they did not grow with love, and the recruiters capitalize on that to understand that those are the people who would easily do things that other people wouldn't do. Which you're required to betray people, you're required to get information, and so on and so forth. So Neptune is also about that type of intelligence, that type of spying. And you could be the psychologist who try to diagnose why does a person betray, not understanding the very recruitment process of these people is of people who will eventually betray, okay? Because that's what they're designed to do. They're designed to do everything that gets them their goal. And it's, you can fool some of the people, some of the time you cannot fool all the people all the time. They're gonna know, okay? And they also learn how to survive. They learn how to kill in all the ways possible. They learn how to stay alive. They learn how to survive persecution. Yes, and it's either going to have an incompetent spy, or you're going to have someone who will survive leaking the information. Talk about, Edward Snowden, more so than Assange. Okay, Julian Assange never worked for the government. Edward Snowden did, and he's finally refugee in Russia. So this is a person that had the ability to expose a scandal and stay alive, which Assange, by the way, did not have. Okay, he was not trained in this way, and we have this free Assange today, but we also have the Israeli person Van Nuno, which we don't know a lot about. It was just mentioned in this article that was what the sketch was about, because he was betraying the country in the sense that he was leaking information about the atomic whatever building or process or whatnot, and his intention was to denucleify the world. So the flying bombardier sketch was like, kind of people talking about this article, and all the while one of the neighbors was missing because he was parking in the parking that the other neighbor thought that that was theirs, and then he went missing with the accusation of a spy. It's becoming more and more relevant to our times. And so they were kind of like mentioning the kind of like the Van Nutu case, and they're like, yeah, he was totally bonkers, he was totally mad, and then an A-bomb drops on them. What we think is that the result of the work, the people betrayed because the result of the work, because the work is draining them. And you might have been a psychologist, but like, oh, spy is a very intense requirement on the psyche, and this is why these people get broken. I don't know, some girl seduces them. No, darling, it's not girls, it's expendable children, whatever. It's not. Girls are too old for them, but those who are at the higher ranks. Okay, it's not everybody, but the thing is that you might have been trying to diagnose. Oh, why does a spy betray the nation? While it's like they were recruited because they're betraying, because they did not grow in love. That was their, kind of, they developed these traits in their upbringing, and they were recruited because of that. So, like, why are you surprised that they betrayed the nation too? It's designed to do that. But when the nation betrays the people, Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden, that's the known case, is what I'm talking about. Okay, so you're in the thrones of some of you. Okay, the early Neptune Sag, you're like, Shelley, we're the guys that exposed that. It wasn't on Twitter, so you haven't seen that. We were talking about this. We're the people that were eliminated from the discourse. We're trying to bring that up. I give you reverence. And some of you are going into your Neptune Square, so you might be that satirical psychologist who tries to diagnose why do spies betray their nation. Like, darling, do you know what he didn't have you? Okay. And again, you are not stupid, and that's what's the most painful. You're not intelligent. You're not used to thinking of yourself as stupid. But right now, with this Neptune, you're incredibly stupid, incredibly ignorant. You're not your fault. There is something missing. And Neptune is also ideation. So you could be having this ideation for your profession, for your family, for your, I don't know, whatever you're related to, for the drugs that you take in to manage your symptoms or whatnot. And this crisis is bringing about, okay, Neptune is great at making something present in its absence. Okay, Julian Assange was arrested, and I think it was Sweden, in his absence. He was arrested in his absence, because it was such a Neptune signature. He was arrested in his absence, was present in his absence. An eclipse with, Venus applying to Neptune is just not yet in orb, but next eclipse is going to be very, in the new synodic cycle. But usually Venus is closing a synodic cycle with Neptune. Saturn is closing a synodic cycle with Neptune. So we get a reality check on all things Neptune. So we mentioned drugs. We mentioned, drug dealing. Drug dealing, the blending between pharmaceuticals, not just for the mental health, and drug dealing. Both the fact that when for example, in Israel, when they legalized medical marijuana, or kind of like medical weed, it was getting more difficult to get a good species type of, you can see how you I'm half Dutch, but I'm privileged enough not to use weed. Albeit all that I've been through. So So the thing is that the quality of the weed was just deteriorating, and so people would need to go back to their herd cells, even though it's like all this process to make it legal, and they have to go back to the drug dealer, because the drug dealer would somehow get their hands on like the good stuff, and the good stuff is to heal, to manage symptoms of pain, because what they're being indoctrinated is healing cancer is torture, which is chemotherapy. There are cures to cancer. There are drugs. Drugs that can cause full remission in terminally ill cancer patient. Suddenly, budget was abrupted. Okay, and you're still marketed chemotherapy. Which, you know, that this is that the medical profession has become a medical warfare and tool of oppression without telling me that, you know. But how do we know that? Okay, the only reason I know that is because I was called to look at I didn't understand, well, why am I called to look at cancer, because I was not an MD. I was just looking at the philosophy of medicines. I was doing it in politics in the government's department. So I was going from like, instead, before I bring in the politics, I'm just going to deal with the science. Okay, I'm just going to learn about the medicines from the epistemic, how do you know that you know, and the ontological unit. And would breed later spirit of matter, which is not the necessarily correct ontological unit, it's just a name for a channel. And go get it the truth. Go get the truth. My instructor was an MD, and he said, you know, when I treat a patient, I read Feyerabend, which is philosopher's science. I don't know how to treat a patient. My answer to you, my dear, I can't, you know, the research that you'll find won't tell you. Okay, the patient is the best person to listen to. The only when the patient knows themselves will you know something. But you are the tool that the patient needs to learn about the world and what we've known about, you know, some dogmas that we have, so that they can get to know themselves better. It's just kind of like a little bit of a very crazy loop. And I can't help you, but to know that you don't know, and to understand that they cannot have this ideation relation with you, and expect you to be a savior, because that can completely go bonkers and it can even die in your hands. So that's the most humble answer that I have right now. I am going to Neptune Square. And while I was called to that, I was actually teaching German, basic German, to a doctor, a family doctor. And we were talking about, you know, like my thesis and stuff like that. And then she was still talking about cancer. And she says, well, she has a colleague that was doing a research, and they had these pills that cause remission in terminally ill cancer patient. I remember which cancer type, and suddenly the budget was abrupted. So I heard it from someone who was a bestie of someone who was doing the research. It's an insider. You won't get that. She won't be able. These people are eliminated on the way. I'm being freaking shadow banned, okay? Which is kind of like the best, the best option of the measures that they could have taken, okay? They took worse, okay? But still, it's kind of like, hey, I'm speaking, I'm alive, okay? Meanwhile, and I hope that was safe. So you can't expect to get this type of, you know, randomized controlled tests of so and so and so and so and so, when there's that much havoc involved in it. Okay, we can go to what we think is the naive approach, but if your epistemic standards for empiricism, okay, how do I know that I know is to read this double-blind blah 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 blah, you're not doing medicine. You're doing an image of medicine. You're doing an ideal that is kind of like, you know, it's kind of like when you want to think about painting with Neptune. If you're trying to paint the image of, you know, ontological unique, which is human being, And you're using very approximate, okay? You're using very smooth lines for their like skin complexion, and so on. You're not drawing you're drawing an ideal image of a person, okay? Your teenager son or daughter are going to see that, and they're going to try to approach this ideal. They can starve themselves. They can think that their cellulite is not okay, or they can think that their cellulite is okay for the wrong reasons, okay, which is another kind of like body image. Wow, okay, we could go for hours on that. Um, and what they won't get is a real appraisal and validation of what it's like to have beauty as a human being. Okay, that's what's up. So when you think about it in Cure for Cancer, then the breaking of a dream is kind of like, hey, this chemo is torture and is designed to make people not survive chemo. And I know I have people who went through chemo and they survived. Okay, so it's not like, but it's not designed for you to survive. Let's just put it that way. And you're getting you're getting beta blockers for the, you take everything for the nausea that these torturous devices do. All the while, the very likely are drugs that can cause full remission. You still have to work on your lifestyle. You still have to do the self-nourishing of like the inner child, the components that contribute. You still have to go through this, but you genuinely would be supported. It generally showed results. It's still the double randomized control. The ANOVA was not the problem there, okay? The corruption was. And the C factor was corruption. And when you don't even know that, it's so much so that when certain public figures are dealing, with cancer, you don't know if they're like, should I approach them with that? Or like, oh, are they treated with those secret drugs? And we don't know. And then they tell you they survived chemo, and everybody's happy for them. Okay, so you don't know which type of a C is that. Is like, they don't know and it's just trying to be eliminated. They try to eliminate them, or is it that they do know and they get the goods that others don't? So it could be either one of the two. And then, if somebody tells you, yeah, you get this thing, this is secret, you can never talk about it, you just say chemo, but you will live. Most likely, if this it's not even because of their own life, it's because they have loved ones and they have family, most likely they would pick that option. So now I'm getting into my phase of kind of like after having my physical proposal, looking into these things, I'm bringing the corruption C factor back, or the politics C factor back to the discourse. That's kind of like the square relations. For you, it might be the same. Okay, you're in the midst of the square. So if I think about, and also you want to think about what's still missing in the square. Okay, one of the greatest satires I saw for an activism, and I had my own satire of an activism. I told you, like, okay, what happened to me. You're right, you expose basically why your clinically trained psychologist can't treat you, and then you go to the clinically trained, because I did not want to get into loops of like vengefulness, or I wanted to be healthy before I continue to address that and see what other steps should I be taking regarding this. And so it's kind of like, hey, I'll try anything, and this is how. This is the situation to get people into. And you probably have found yourself in a similar situation. One of the greatest satire examples was a person, a very bright person. They went through a horrible 2019, and they were very famous in their own business. They did marketing, incredibly talented, managing people, working with people, always bringing people up. They were incredibly betrayed. And of course, everybody around them that was either a healer or a psychiatrist or a psychologist or even an astrologer they were corrupt. Okay, you know, how do you say that? Astrology is not exempt from that. Is there are, when you're in the circles of the who's and who's, you're dealing with big egos and you're dealing with big Neptune issues. You're dealing with the circles of the who's and who's. So then I experienced it's very small. It's kind of like the city that I was living in. There's somebody wanted me to be the apprentice, and then, you know, we found out that they are isolating me in the social group, and I'm like, this is so bizarre. Why did you want me to be your apprentice or your assistant when you're doing that? But it's like, okay, fine. That's it's kind of like the politics of this issue. This is a very small scale. Could still have risked my life, but it's very small scale. You move out of the circle. There are many other circles, but when you're with the who's and who's, there are not many other circles. You don't know the many other circles. Okay, what you do run is to the average person become more like a people's person. That's what happened to them. But what they didn't get was that that pizza place that they're working with from could very well be having to sustain themselves and sustain protection. They always ask these business for protection. It's kind of like gopher. And they would either probably have to do a drug dealing portal in their business. So you're not targeted because you came from a certain background, strong. You still got it. You went through an incredible crisis. You still got all these things were working for you, okay? But those people that don't have this back, and that their coping mechanism is not overworking themselves, those might be targeted and might be threatened in your very pizza business. You don't leave between the drug dealer and the drug dealer, you don't leave a place where a person can just be. And that person usually means they're going to do something that's the closest to artistic that still yields some sort of income. So that would either be kind of like healing, crystals, astrology, kind of like a form of the a modern day shamanism, but it's not the genuine like shamanism, but it's the closest to do this thing in modern days. It still somehow have income. It has a lot of pitfalls, but if you don't leave a person, okay, or they would still have to go to the psychiatrist, to the psychologist to be diagnosed, to go to receive welfare, and to have the rights basically very largely confiscated, which is what you're supposedly working against when you're working against psychiatry. Okay, you are that type of activist right now if you're in the square. And this very video might be kind of like, oh shit, okay? Another thing to do with drug dealing or organized crime, that they're so related, but it's also, did we as society leave people a place to be able to work in a way that is contributing to their health and not forcing them into either organized crime or other type of organized crime? Okay, which is kind of like the pharmaceuticals or the drug dealing. And actually one thing, I'm not going to say the name, there was a person that was forcibly hospitalized around the 7th of October because he knew people from the Nova who were also forcibly hospitalized. But he was growing up in several countries, and he was connected with drug dealing. He was doing drug dealing when he was a young person. That's how he's learned his work ethic. You can understand that the work ethic of a drug dealer are just like the work ethic of any person who needs drugs. Okay, they're oppressive. And so he paid a lawyer to release him, and then he had an opinion of another psychiatrist. So he didn't necessarily have to bribe this other psychiatrist, just the connection between pharmaceuticals and drug dealing so much that other person was telling him right up front, okay, when I heard the story, you're a genius, you're just being persecuted. And it's not that he's not a genius, it's that it's easier to get that when you had the background of drug dealing. That's what's up, okay? That's the Neptune Square. And the understanding that these people are being pushed to one fate or the other, and to maintain their rights, they actually have to go to a place that it takes the right away. Okay? Organized crime takes the right of the person away, and then that's the way to do social reform, social whatnot. So we are now in this such situation where people have to be criminals to disobey the government, but you also have to disobey the organized crime. Okay, disobey is not just to the official 2030, it's also to those people who will tell you, hey, don't vaccinate, don't this, don't that. Oh, but come work with me. I have a friend, I have a pub. You need €1,000 to buy a pub, darling, I'm Dutch. Okay, but if I wasn't, okay, then people would go there and think, you go work with the bartender. Yeah, maybe you dance a little bit. Like, no, that's not what's up. That's not what's up. And the main thing is expandable children. The main thing is not drug dealing, it's expandable children. So all of that is pretty stressful. But again, if you're already on the path to the trine, the more you are on the path to the trine, the earlier Neptune side you are, the more you are on the path to the trine, the more you are in the way, if you're listening to this video, the more you are like, oh, now they get it. Now the Pluto Scorpios are getting that. Finally, when the Pluto Scorpios get that, oh my God, when they'll be going through their trine. But those of you who are still in the thrones of like the square, you see the take of the Pluto Scorpios. You're like, they're exposing you. You've been the doctor. You're like, oh my God. Or alternatively, you've been the family member who've been persecuting people. And they're also exposing the fellow Pluto Scorpions, okay? So it's kind of like you've been the person. They're like, oh, my very best friend killed himself because they didn't receive help, because you were persecuting them to the point where they got that helpless, where they had nowhere to go, and they just took their life away because they were kind with you. They didn't want to, or they tried to tell you that, but you weren't even listening anymore. So they spoke in the 5th dimension, the 4th dimension, the 3rd dimension. They couldn't tell you that that's what you're doing because you wouldn't believe them, and then things would get even more horrid. But they still tried to get the point across to you because they know what you're heading to. Okay? You were actively murdering them. And I'd rather say this now because you're going to be having more friends in this situation. You got to it's not even about repent in the sense, because very likely you've been genuinely trying to save their lives. But it's like, if you don't repent and correct these ways, not because you're not a sinner in the sense of kind of like the religious sinner, but it's like you've been doing the wrong things to get the right things, and you didn't get the right things because what you've been doing was basically murder. In the guise of, this is medical welfare. Medical welfare is not all we're going, it's not just that, we're going to give them this smallpox infused blankets and then, they're going to die by the dozens. But it's also, we're going to get the family to do that. We're going to get the people to do that, believing that they're helping the person. That's Neptune. That's medical welfare Neptune style, okay? You're very likely, if you're in the square, been a participant in one way or another in doing just that. You have to correct your ways when that was the case, okay? So this is when it comes to medicine. This is also when it comes to spying, okay? If you think Van Uno was this crazy bonkers person because he wanted to denucleify the, we are now at the brinks of a nuclear war. You do it like, who is Van Uno? What kind of a name is Van Uno? Google it. It's just probably VAANUNU. Okay. and Neptune is about also isolating people. So you think about, oh, this is a war crime. How many people died when they tried to report an illegal order or to try to disobey an illegal order? Here you can disobey. Oh, fine, disobey. Give a protocol of what you can practically do to people, because do they want, they won't necessarily know. And what more? Neptune. So the drugs and the effect, drug dealing, spies, ideation and evaluation, mental health, physical health, medicine, but also shamanism, healing, astrology, models of healing. Yes, maybe even a little bit, religion and philosophy. Yeah, definitely. It's not Islamophobia, it's genuinely pointing to the fact that Muhammad was marrying a 6-year-old child. And I'll end with that.